Hello, Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to another edition of Between Two Mimbers.
Right.
So let's tie it back to what we were discussing in this half of the show, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this. You say all of that. I agree with it wholeheartedly. I completely agree with it. Any sane person would probably find it hard to disagree with. But what I'm seeing now from our community, people within our community, whoever says that what you just said, they come back and say, oh, remember these faces, remember these names, and when the Taliban starts massacring you, these people will have bloods in their hands, and they should be held responsible. So people going in that extreme where whoever is trying to be the voice of reason, not saying the Taliban are the best in the world, no one's admitting to that, no one's rejecting whatever happened in the 90s and before, but I see a lot of the Shia populists, at least online, they are clear to demarcate and say, okay, if you're on that on that side of the group, you're either probably pro Iran because now the Taliban are cool with Iran, so now you're also cool with them, or you're just not that good of a Shia. You're just like one of those fake Shias who don't. So anything that that doesn't fall in your own mental ideology, you're quick to do a trap and say fake news, right? What do you say to that, and how do you describe that? Why is this the case within our community, which for the longest time, as at least my opinion was, that our community is much more you know uh, uh, free in accepting different ideas, much more tolerant of different ideas. But now we're seeing that anything that goes slightly against what you think, you're quick to say, brandish someone as pro this or anti that or whatever.
That's. You want to take that, Soros, and then I'll go for it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so go for it.
yep. So I think part of the problem is, and excuse me, and excuse any of the listeners who may hold these views, because I'm sure there are. The problem, a part of the problem is I am absolving myself of, anything that happens bad. For instance, if I go and say, hey, let's be rational. So if tomorrow the Taliban start killing the Shia, I can go and say, look, see, I was against them from the get-go.
Yeah.
And it's this virtual brownie points that we're trying to earn. And the other
Exactly.
thing,
Yeah.
unfortunately, the other unfortunate problem, and it again, this comes from the fact that, and this was a question that I asked, why is it that Shias aren't going ape shit, excuse my language, when
Yeah.
with the fall of the caliphate, whereas like a lot of our Sunni brothers, they feel the need to recreate the caliphate or the emirat or whatever, and like these symbolic
Hmm.
rulers. And the reason for that is, if we look at Shia history, we've been on the back burner. We've been on the fringes of society for majority of our existence.
Yeah.
And whether we like to admit it or not, even with the Bayuds and with the Fatimids and the other, Shia governments, the first real Shia world power was the Safavid Iran, and that's only 500 years compared to everything else. And it wasn't until 1979 when Imam Khomeini brought the Islamic Revolution of Iran that Shia Islam and the 12 Shari Islam became this legitimate force of resistance against anti-Islamic forces.
Right.
Up until then, we were just these crazy heretics. I mean, Ali might correct me if I'm wrong. So for that, like we've only been dealing with like 40 years of that, and
Yeah.
for a lot of we have parents and grandparents who lived in a time before the Iranian Revolution. I mean, my brothers lived before the Iranian Revolution. They were young men when this happened. So to them, this is for especially in South Asia and India, Pakistan, the subcontinent, this is a very new thing where, and like you pointed out, oh, the Taliban are, working with Iran. Look, we need to understand the government of Iran is not the government of the Imam. So you cannot hold it to that higher standard of the Imam.
Yeah. It's a government
And
of Iran.
unfortunately,
That's what
that,
it is. It's just a government
yes,
of that
yes.
country. So they're gonna do what's right for
I
them.
mean, like as I said earlier, I have the utmost respect for all our ulama, from Ayatollah Khamenei to Sistani Saab, Sayyid Kamal Haidari, and Wahid Khorasani, and everybody else in between. But they are not the imam. They are not a masum. They can make mistakes. They're doing the best they can with the given hand that they're playing.
Yeah.
And honestly, I would say kudos to the Taliban government for recognizing that cultural ties are stronger than these quasi-religious ones that they're trying to build with Saudi Arabia, because
Yeah.
Afghanistan, culturally, linguistically, and socially, they are an Turkic Iranian people. They half the country speaks Dari, which is a variant of Farsi. So
And let
to
me
them
and
realize, yes,
on that note, let
mm,
me quickly bring in Ayatollah Khamenei's tweet that I saw this morning, which says, "We support the nation of Afghanistan. Governments come and go. What remains is the
mm,
Afghan nation. The nature of our
mm,
relations with the government depends on the nature of the relation with us. May God bring us the best situation in the nature for." So you're seeing that that hand that they're trying to put forward towards Afghanistan, trying to call them our people and all of that, which is
mm.
unprecedented, right? Imagine
It is. It is.
that happening a few, maybe a few years ago, when we were like, Taliban equal bad and that's it. Like, we would like to paint people
Yeah,
in black and white, and they can never
exactly.
change.
And Ali Bhai might disagree with me, but like seeing as Imran Khan is he's a ethnic Pakhtun.
Yeah,
His family is originally Pashto speaking, and elements within the Pakistani government, they understand. Look, realistically speaking, if you've been following this war, there was no other alternative except for the Taliban coming into power. That was a given.
that was a given. Yeah,
And
even day one it was
so,
a given. Yeah.
yeah, so the regional powers working with the Taliban government, they're not doing it necessarily. I'm not saying about Imran Khan, I don't know, but for instance, Iran, right? They're not doing it because they love the Taliban government. They're
Yeah,
doing it because they're like, what's our alternative? Like, you want to support the local, obviously Shia militias and the Shia, and then like the non Salafist elements, but how do you support that when there is no, resistance movement?
so come
You're
back
not gonna
to
go work. Yeah,
the pluralism part. Like, why do you think
yeah.
that there's
So
so much hate between these two camps, that we've kind of like drawn a few camps, and this is just Afghanistan, right? But there are other things too. Like,
mm,
the other day, just yesterday, I was looking at
mm,
what our community is fighting now, and now apparently someone's fighting because they're like, oh, why should we commemorate Muharram for 2 months and 8 days versus the first 10 days? And both parties are going at it as if like one is left religion and the other is the very forefront of religion. So I mean, it's the extremities that we go, and you may have opinions to whatever you want to do, but the extremism is that if you're celebrating, or I mean, not if you're commemorating Muharram for 2 months and 8 days, you're just like a lunatic because you're like extreme. And if you're doing it for the first 10 days only, you're not even a follower of the Imam. I mean, there's just so much
so
extremism happening. What's the reason behind that?
to me, I think the problem is we don't have a true connection to the other beds and to Allah. That's to me, that's the problem. Is this for hubbullah or hubbul nafs? Am I doing this for myself? Like, here's the thing: if I genuinely think that I am doing this for Abba Abdullah, right?
Yeah.
It shouldn't matter if I'm doing it for 10 days or if I'm doing it 365 days. Because we have ahadiths from the Imams that, for instance, Imam Zainul Abidin was in mourning his whole life. But then we
Mm-hmm.
also have hadiths that, the Imams tell us that the days of Ghadir and the days of the Eids that we should be celebrating, or Eid al-Zahra, we should be celebrating. So how do we juxtapose these different hadiths? The problem, the thing is, if I'm doing something, it should be out of the love for Ahlul Bayt, right? And out of love, or my love for Allah. And I should try to do the best I can,
Mm-hmm.
not, and it shouldn't matter what, for instance, you're doing or what Ali Bhai is doing, because, the whole concept of husn zan, that I should come up with 72 excuses that maybe, it's okay if Ali Bhai, like for instance, is against Zanjir and I am for Zanjir, that hey,
Right.
maybe he believes in giving blood and that's okay. And he's
Yeah.
doing it for the love of Imam Hussein. Now, it shouldn't be that I chase after him with a, Red Cross emblem. Ali Bhai, you have to give blood. And, or he's chasing after me with a churiya and like Zanjir that, no, Saroj, you have
Sanjeev.
to go beat Zanjir, right? Or,
Or if you
anything
don't
like
do
that.
it, then
Because
you're like anti Matam or anti
exactly.
Azadari.
Exactly, because it's, again, like we were talking about earlier, right? Is this are we a religion of rituals, or are we a living, breathing religion?
And I think Ali
And
Bhai has
even
a
if
lot to
you
say
look at,
about that too.
yeah, and I'm gonna hand it over to him. Just one last thought on that is, we just look at our ulama. There's so much polarity in that.
Yeah. Yeah. And even the
Ali
followers
Bhai,
of Ali Bhai, before I go to Ali Bhai, just
mm,
imagine living at the time of Amirul Mu'mineen. We know
mm,
that his lovers at the time, they were at different levels of the marifa that they had for the Imam, right? Not
mm,
everyone was
mm,
exactly the same. Like not everyone loved him or endeared him or followed him exactly the same way, right? Just going
mm,
back to I think Imam Musa Kazim, I think when he had that one incident where the three of his followers had different interpretation to
mm.
a
Gee,
letter that they received, right? Jim.
mm,
So that
yes.
goes to prove that there are people who can interpret, and they were all doing it out of love, the Imam, right? They weren't doing it for
Mm-hmm,
themselves, apparently, right? They were doing it for out of the
mm,
love and their understanding of the Imam. So if there were pluralistic people around the Imams when they were existing, living, breathing amongst us, why can't we have pluralistic, people, or at least give them the benefit of the doubt, saying that hey, Imam's not here, so maybe they will probably correct themselves. If you feel like you're right and they're wrong, maybe they'll probably correct themselves when the Imam is here in person, right? So give
mm,
them that benefit of the
mm.
doubt, extend that arm to them and say, hey, you know what, it's not worth fighting over these things. It's just okay, to you it's your views and to me it's my views. Don't enforce mine on yours, and vice versa. Ali bhai.
Yeah, yeah. It's there are a lot of things you guys have mentioned. So it's a big topic, right? I mean, you started
Yeah.
off with Akbarism, and we somehow ended up here. Uh,
Mhm,
just to clarify, right? Akbarism is something that was okay. I'll go back again. That's why context is very important, right?
mhm,
Majority of the issues are what? Even if you take pluralism, let's take Akbarism within it, right? And we'll take others, the Malay group or the non-Malay group, Muqassirs and what is the other?
The ghalis,
Uh,
the ghalis.
Ghalis and Zanjir guys and the anti-Zanjir guys,
Yeah.
right? The
Pro tatveer, anti tatveer. Yeah.
Khameneites, and the uh,
The
what is
Sistanis.
the
Yeah.
other term? I don't say Sistani. Yeah, let's say Sistani, right? But
But that's what they usually break
Khameneites and
down. Yeah.
anti-Khameneites, right? Or Velayat Faqih supporters, anti-Velayat Faqih supporters. Then you also
Yeah.
have, and the other group is Marja supporters, anti-Marja supporters, right?
Yeah.
Taqlid supporters, anti-Taqlid
mhm,
supporters.
Yeah.
So
mhm,
then you have other groups that are coming in, right? What are the other groups? From the female perspective, right? Female empowerment, that means no hijab, none of that stuff, versus, there's a huge supportive movement that's standing for hijab, all of that. And, it's such an awkward thing to see on one side, France fighting for
mhm,
the Afghanis, and on the other hand, they're oppressing their own people. So it's like,
Yeah.
come on, man, get on a, same page, whatever.
Pick a
So
side. Yeah,
point
pick a
being
side.
is there's a lot of stuff that is happening, right? And why is that happening? I think that's a very good question, right? That's the question to ask. The question is not whether all this is okay or not. It's a much higher question. It goes back to basic stuff that you cannot have pluralism in, right?
Hmm.
If you go back to the major pillars of Islam, what are they? Tawheed, right? In Tawheed, can
Right.
you have pluralism?
No.
No,
That's just
right?
yeah, one opinion. Yeah.
In Nabuwat, can you have I know, I mean, I'm talking about Muslims. I'm not even talking about opinion. In
Yeah.
Muslims, in Tawheed, if you have pluralism, then you have a problem, right? It's a
Yeah.
major problem, right?
Yeah.
So
It
it's a
is.
critical issue. It's not even a major
But
or
then
minor issue,
anyway,
right?
like
So
yeah, but Adi bhai, even within Tawheed, like you have people that genuinely believe that oh yeah, Allah is one, but
But he may have a
Imam
body
Ali
and
is
all of that.
also yeah, Imam Ali is also,
we'll come
the
to that. We'll come
physical
to that.
manifestation.
So we'll come to that. Imam Ali himself has called those people kafir. So we'll come to that. We'll come to that, right?
Hmm.
And why that is too. We'll come
Hmm.
to that as well. But first of all, let's figure this piece out. Let's put facts and how we do it in philosophy. You have
Hmm.
Can you have pluralism in Tawheed? No, you cannot. In Nabuwa, can you have pluralism? At least at the last after
Yeah.
Rasulullah, you
No.
cannot, right? Qadiani's tried that, and we know what happened, right?
Yeah.
So you cannot.
Yeah.
In Imamat, can you have pluralism other than the
No.
12 we have? No, at least
No.
for the Shias, no, we
Yeah.
don't, right? Okay. In Qiyamah, for all Muslims, can you have pluralism?
No, you can't
No.
have another opinion on that. Yeah.
You cannot
No.
have another opinion on that,
But
right?
those are the
Uh,
usul right?
Yeah.
I'm coming to that, right? So now we have, at least we have a standard now. We have one thing we can go back to and say, at least in these things, there's no such thing as pluralism. We cannot have it, right?
Yeah.
Now, when we're agreeing that there's no pluralism here, that means anything that is coming from these sources, and we'll take the sources are basically the Tawheed, whatever is said, Allah's word, Quran, right? Then we have
Mhm.
Nabuwa, the Hadith, and then from the Imams, the Hadiths that have come to us, right?
Yeah.
So anything that is coming from these resources has to be followed and is the law of the land.
Hujjah. Yeah.
It's the Hujjah, right? It's the law of the land. It doesn't matter where you are, what part of the country or planet you're on. You're on Mars, you're on Venus, International Space Station. It doesn't matter. You follow these. These are the laws, right? The basic issue that comes, and again, I'm going to start from the Shias and then we'll move on, right? Because I think the whole idea of video to get to the issues that we have within the Shias mainly, right? The main issue comes from all of this comes from what? There's only one thing that's the main issue, and that was a major problem between the Ahwadis and the Sulis. It's ijtihad, right? The deriving of these resources and taking them on their face value, right? Now,
Interpretation,
Ahwadis
basically.
believe in one thing, interpretation, right? Ahwadis believe we're only going to take the Sunnah and we're going to take the Quran. That's it, on its face value. Even if the Imams have come and said, described it differently, some early scholars have described it separately. Nope, we're not going to do that. Usulis work on a number of things, right? They take the Quran, they take the Sunnah, then there's Ijma, then there's you have intellect as well. There are multiple other sources that are involved where you're taking this. You have to look at Rajal as well. Like you cannot talk about Rajal unless you have like PhDs in Rajal, right? Why? Because then you are a trusted scholar that knows exactly what the chain was. You remember the family chains. You remember the geographic chain. Like there are multiple things involved once you get into this, right? You'll be surprised that Sheikh Suduq is sometimes referred to as a Akhbari scholar. And he's one of the earliest scholars, one of the most famous scholars in Shia Islam. Yeah, he is, right? If you're in some of these circles, learning circles, you realize that he was called that, right? And if not the father of the movement, right? I mean, early movement. The father of movement,
I've heard
the
that
actual
about Allama
Akhbaris.
Majlisi.
Yeah.
Majlisi too. I mean, so these are why they had opinions, right? So see, at times we need to realize information the way it's available to us right now. We have three separate areas, and we're talking about this, and we can probably add somebody from Iran, Iraq, or Pakistan even in this, right?
Yeah.
This is not how things were done. So that's why context is so important. If you go back in history, you have to look at the geographic locations they were sitting in. You have to look at the kingdoms they were sitting in. Half the time when they said a lot of stuff, they were, the person sitting in front of them or around them were hostile, right?
Yeah.
So you have to be very careful on the things they're saying. Even a lot of stuff was said in Taqiyya, right? That's why you need scholars who understand Rajal. You need scholars who understand ijtihad so, it's such in such depth that they can deduct that, okay, this was said in taqiyya or not, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Now, all of this comes from what? All of this, there are people who are actually studying it, right? I mean, you guys have probably seen my, library collection that's becoming here. And here, this is the new tafsir actually for the Quran, right? That I'm going through right now. Here are some new books that came in, right? It's not easy trying to get into this, trying to learn religion. It's very hard, right? And the guys who do it from the start, from an early age, kudos to them, right? And so I just got this Al Khisal, this Sheikh Saduq's book. So if I show this to somebody, does that point me as being an akhbari? No, right? It's a learning process. It's a learning process. You learn so many different things, and I'm sure when we have had our WhatsApp conversations or phone conversations, there are new things that I've told you guys that even I didn't know, and I was surprised about, right?
Right.
That these things exist, but but just because things have been done culturally so much, and honestly, I will blame the ulama community for this to a certain degree, the Zakir community, especially coming out of South Asia. That includes Iran, not Iran, sorry, at least Pakistan, India, and whatever else, right?
Bangladesh, yeah.
Because 95% of everything that we're taking from one book by Allama Majlisi, and that's Bihar, right? And Bihar Anwar has pretty much everything. Anything you could find, any hadith you could find, you just put it. There are places where he himself says, I don't know, I have no sanad for this. I have no source for this. I just heard it, so I wrote it, right? One of the most famous hadiths
Unfortunately,
that he wrote.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I was just going to say, like, to your point, that we treat the Bihar as an equivalent of the Quran.
Exactly. And that's a problem in South Asia, a huge, massive problem. Because a lot of the other books have been translated, but we still don't try to read them. We just go with this because this was one of the first ones translated. Allama was his name, and it's been taught across the Hawla system in South Asia, right? So we have problems with that. For example, I'll take one thing that forget Akhbari, forget Usuli, forget any type of Shia you are. I don't care, right? You believe in Marjah or you don't believe in Marjah, right? And I'm going to say something might become controversial. I don't care because it's a fact. It's a fact. We talk about Bibi Sohra. There's only one source that comes from Bihar, and I'll give you guys this homework. Go and read in Bihar what it says. That source has no sanad. And Allama Majlisi himself writes that, I liked it, so I put it here, right? Every other maktal you read, every other departure, Imam said departing from Medina and Makkah, you read the story, he took his entire family, every single daughter went with him, right? Go into any Shia mosque, any Shia Imam Barga, and tell them, ye jo aap, whatever you're reading or this is actually wrong. I don't know why you guys are doing it this much, and they're going to throw you out. Because that has become part of the religion.
Right.
Right? Now, I'm talking about something that is this small, that everybody across, be a Zanjiri, non-Zanjiri, be, saying, Na'uzubillah, Ali Allah, whatever or not, it doesn't matter.
And it has
if you believe in
absolutely no
Al-Sunnah or
impact.
not.
And it has absolutely no impact on our religion
No
at
impact
all.
on anything, but you say this and you're going to have enemies standing.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's unfortunate.
That's
a prime,
right.
another prime example of this. Kitab al-Sulaim. Kitab al-Sulaim. You ask anybody, the whole story of Bibi Fatima is in Kitab al-Sulaim. Okay, where's Kitab al-Sulaim? Oh, it's in Bihar al-Anwar. It's like, okay, but where's the actual source? Oh, no, I trust Allama Majlisi, who lived 1500 years, like in the 1500s. I'm not going to do any research on my own. But, because Kitab al-Sulaim says it, and although I'm not saying that you can't prove these things outside of Kitab al-Sulaim, but to your point, we're going back only based on this source.
Right.
But I think that is the key major problem, right? Now, the story of Bibi Fatima, I mean, I'm again, as you said, there are multiple other sources we can prove that from. So it's not just Al-Sulaim, but itself, that book itself is a problem, right? There are other books out there that have been brought out and they have been problematic. Why do we say Bukhari is a huge issue and Muslim is a huge issue? Because we say they were written down in the time of rulers who are oppressive to the Alabet, right? And then as history went along, as as time went along, more things kept being added and then being removed, right? Now, if you compare, you have Muslim, you have Bukhari, you have Majah, you have Ibn Dawood, you have Majan, I don't know, like
Sunnah
6 or 7 books, right? Whatever, 6 books. You will find similar stories. Like in Bukhari, it's only one line, and then you go in Muslim, the whole thing exactly from the same author, from the same line. It says, oh, it's a full paragraph. Now you go into Majah, and you're gonna be like, oh wow, it has like 2 pages about it, right? So there's stories like that across even in Al Sunnah, right? So we have to believe and give some doubt to a lot of the books that we read, and more doubt to the things we hear from the member, right? Why is it that a lot of our stuff, and as I said, right, I'm going to talk universal Shias. Why is it a lot of our stuff is embedded in medievalism? You always hear about spears and knives and swords and yada yada yada, right? While the future is moving like at the speed of light, we already are at we already landed on Mars in less than 100 years, and we have from actually 104 years, I think, from the actual first flight of the Wright brothers to having a drone flying on Mars. So in the next 100 years, if we actually have somebody who's a Shia kid who's who wants to go in NASA and wants to get selected to go to the colony in Mars, who's giving them these rules? Okay, fine. You gotta okay. Even if you're on Mars, you have to pray towards the Kaaba. Fine. What if you're on the other side? Because then, even if you're praying anyway, you're actually a side that is opposing Earth, right? So, what way are you praying? What are you gonna do? Who comes up with these? And I'm gonna say why. Why am I telling all this in a little bit, right? So, you have even 100 years from now, you're gonna have this. At that point, what are you gonna worry about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether you're gonna say Ali Waliyullah or not, or we're gonna say this or not, or can we read this, the third Shahadat or not, and things like that, right? The problem is all of this. Even 100 years from now, if this is a problem, and now more or less is becoming more of a problem, is because we have uneducated Zakirin sitting on the members.
Excellent.
Okay,
that is very
uneducated Zakirin, and by that I'm not targeting the actual alims, even though a lot of alims go to these houses, they study, they put a mama, and then their major thing, what do they have to do? Oh, we need to go get a job. What is their job?
To recite.
To get majalis, right?
To be entertainers. To be honest,
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that. Okay.
To please the crowd.
I wouldn't use that
to please
word.
the crowd.
I wouldn't use that
to please
word.
the crowd.
But yet, I would say this is how they're making their living, right? Which is fine. There's nothing wrong in asking for money to recite. There's absolutely nothing wrong in that, right? The issue is if you're reciting something that makes absolutely no sense to the audience you're reciting to. You open a new center in the United States of America, the first thing you look for is an alim who can become a resident alim. And the first thing you look for, who is one of the best ones who can come from South Asia? Or an alim who has lived in South Asia most of his life, has never been to high school here, has never been to college here, has never worked in a corporate environment here, and now that person becomes your resident alim.
Yeah.
What do you think is going to happen to the community? And then you complain our youth are going away, right? So I'm saying
the guy can't relate.
You can't relate because the issues that they face is not something that you're facing. Recently, in a city in USA, I was listening to an alim wearing an amama. He wasn't wearing an amama before. Now he wears an amama. And, he's called to these very progressive circles at times, and he goes and recites, and now he started doing English too. He's sitting on the member and saying, if you play these video games, you're doing haram and you're doing this and that, yada, yada, yada. He goes all off against these video games, right? Every video game that exists, probably Call of Duty, probably Battlefield, all of the games. I played them, and they've got, he went all out against them. That if you do this, you're doing haram and you're putting your children in haram and kullu haram. And for you, you're ruining your life too, right? And your children are not, whatever. And he's saying it with so much conviction that the person sitting in front, who himself has no knowledge, will go home and is going to take away the kid's video games. And guess what's going to happen then? That kid is not going to start hating the father. He's not even going to start hating the alim. He's going to start hating the religion.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right, and that's where you have a lot of these pluralisms coming up, and he will end up going somewhere. It says, "Hey, I want a religion of peace and love. I don't want a religion where I can't even play my video games in peace." Right? So that's and to that alim's, let me say this: that he himself would have never played a single video game in his life. Right? Now that's where the problem is, right? So when Imam Ali has said, "Do not raise your kids the way you were raised," he didn't mean, give them like a big house or give them like a fancy car, right? Or
Mhm.
take them away from Pakistan, India, Iran, Iraq, or the Middle East and put them in America or in the UK. No, he meant the ways and the way the things are done today. Like if you're gonna tell your kid, "Oh, internet and your cell phone is the root of all evil," you're not gonna get it. Why? Because Islam? Then you're not going to lose the kid because of you. You're going to lose the kid being a Muslim.
Yeah,
Simple as that. Yeah, he will listen to you and follow you all until he can get out of the house and not live with you anymore.
yeah, that
Right?
is true.
So, why am I
That's
giving
true.
you all this context? Why am I giving all this context? Because we have lack of education, massive lack of education. What do the majority of the Sunday schools do today in USA? I'm not going to talk about other countries. I'm not even talking about Pakistan or
Glorified
India because we don't
babysitters.
live there. My kids don't go there. Your
Glorified
kids really is not
babysitters.
going to go there.
Yeah,
That's what
They're
they are.
glorified
They're going to teach
babysitters.
them.
That's
They're going to teach them basic Quran, basic duas, knowledge about the imams. Imam Ali's name is this. Imam Ali's mother name Imam Hussein was this. Their mother was this. Their brother, their sister. That's it. That's the Sunday
mhm,
school,
mhm.
right? And it's a
I
great
mean,
place for parents to meet
as a
up and
product,
hang out as a
yeah,
community center.
yeah. I mean, as a product of Sabah, of the Sabah Sunday School, I can tell you there were times like my teacher's like, "Oh, Sarosh, you're very smart." And I'm like, "No, like I already know the 12 imams from like childhood. Okay, tell me something else besides who the 12 imams were.
Well,
Tell me more
I
about
think
their
that's
life."
the key, right? So it's not just Sabah or like Al Hadi or like New York or ICs or all of that across USA.
Mhm,
I've been to Sunday school in the Middle East, same stuff, right?
mhm,
So it's not like
mhm,
I think universally Sunday schools. What we have done is we have said we're going to send our child to Sunday school, and by the time he's 18, he's going to know everything about the religion, and that's it. And because we take our children to the majalis that we want to listen to in Urdu,
mhm,
because we have fun listening
mhm,
to them. They know Shiism
mhm.
perfectly. They know everything, right?
okay,
And
And
that's
just
exactly where the problem
and to
is.
that, yes,
well,
sorry.
yeah. Finish your thought, Ali. Sarosh, before I go.
Okay. So, to your point, Ali, like the other problem in that is who's teaching your kids at the Sunday school? It's volunteers who know probably as much as the parents. And the other thing is, like you said, great, like going to Urdu majalis is not the problem. The problem is, are you having the conversation with your kid after the majlis? That, hey,
Yeah.
what did the Maulana say? Or, hey, let me explain something to you and, have these conversations. I mean, I remember as a small child, going to bed and like my father used to tell me all the stories about the imams and the prophets and about being from Paher Ser Agra. I heard about Qazi Saab and Qazi Saab ka mazar in Agra, and that's when I got older I started reading about Shahid Salis and I'm like, oh, Qazi Nurul Nashistri is the Qazi Saab my dad told me about. But how many of us actually have those stories?
Yeah.
And the first time we're
It's
exposed to them is, oh, go ahead.
so coming back to that point, right? And I'm gonna just wrap up whatever I was saying really quickly, and then hand it back to you, Zaid. Is because the lack of knowledge that existed in our communities back in the 70s and 80s. We are not the same Shias, by the way. We have not had this much Shia movement, as I've always said, I think in my last conversations too, that we are in a golden period of Shiism, or maybe the golden period is yet to come, and we are just still progressing towards it. Or moving towards it, but as of now, the golden period of Shiism is everybody knows you're a Shia, right? There's at least people who are intellectual enough who try to seek knowledge, they know what the difference between a Shia and a Shia and a Sunni is to a certain degree, right? And a majority of the issues that we have had is because we do way too much intra faith events where the other side does not want to do it with you. We have done a lot more to say no, you're our brothers, while the other side has not done to say yes, you're our brothers too, right? So I would say like if 60% of our alimuddin and ulama go out and say yes, they are our brothers, I think only 10% or maybe 5% of theirs do the same thing to us, right? So
Hmm.
we are still in the defensive mode that we're coming in from the 1900s where our parents were probably in taqiyya in some areas in India or Pakistan or wherever the hell, and we're continuing the same thing in the USA. right? You're continuing the same thing in the UK, in Australia, in Canada, all of these countries where you have freedom of speech and you're allowed to propagate what you want without having repercussions. So even in that, right? We have in how many times in our own houses when we hear about baby Fatma do we actually say who the main culprit was
Mhm. True.
to our kids?
Even in our
We're
even in
afraid.
our yeah, even in our own house, we're afraid that it's controversial.
That's the problem. So you see, first we have a problem of being very less religious. I think every Shia kid, every Shia adult or teenager needs to go through at least the pre-Hausa course once in their life,
Hmm.
right? It's one semester long. It's going to be 4 months of your life, but the amount of knowledge that you gain out of it is going
Yeah.
to be so influential in everything you do and how you understand religion itself, right? For example, we'll take a small issue in pluralism: marjiyat and non-marjiyat.
Hmm.
I follow marja, I don't follow marja, right? Ask anybody who doesn't even follow marja, hey, where did you learn how to do the namaz? Oh, my dad taught me. So you're in his marjiyat? You learned it from somebody, right? Who did your dad learn it from, right? The chain will keep going, their father, and somewhere in that line, they would have learned it from an alim or they would have learned it from some marja that they were following.
Yeah.
Back in the day when the internet did not exist, today you send an email to Agha Sistani, Agha Khamenei, and you get a response within minutes or within days at most, right? And they already have knives that you can ask questions from. Even if you don't, even if you're, and these are for people who are like, who have no idea that Sistani, what is it, IS or Sistani site exists, Khamenei site exists, books all around the world exist in English and Urdu in every language you can possibly find. They exist online on Islam and so many other places. The ones who cannot do any of that can actually send an email. The ones who cannot do any of that can actually call somebody and
Right.
you'll get an answer, right?
Right.
So if you go back 200, 300 years ago, this did not exist. So how do you think people were learning from these mirages that existed? That's why we had a lot of mirages back then, by the way. Today we
Hmm.
have the famous ones are 8 or 10. The top two,
Hmm.
like the rock stars, are Khamenei and Sistani, right? But we still have more merges. It doesn't mean you
Yeah.
only have to follow two. You can follow anyone you want. But
Right.
back in the day, you had way more because somebody's sitting in a small city in, somewhere in India close to Bangladesh. How is he going to have access to somebody in Iraq?
Yeah.
Is he going to go on a camel or a horseback all the way to Iraq to one question and come back? No, there's somebody who is closer by in a close by village who was a mujtahid, a marja level person who would give them the answer. That's how they
Yeah.
learned. And then when they came back, there were other people in their village asking, "Hey, tell us, what did you do?" So now, even without following that marja, they're technically following that marja because that one person who came back spread that knowledge.
Right.
That's why
Hmm.
understanding history is so important. A lot of our Zakireen have no clue what history is, what world history is, how things people used to move, the geopolitical situations back in the day, and then how knowledge was spread, right? They want to live
Hmm.
in today's world and say, oh, yeah, okay, whatever this guy is saying is wrong, without any sanad, without any backing, right? Without understanding fiqh, without understanding
Hmm.
usul, they want to say this is wrong, right? The arguments
Hmm.
between Akhbarism and usulis were not about Zanjir Zani and about Marjiyat or not, right? They did have issues with Marjid, but it was more about how do we derive these sources
Source.
and get it to the
Source.
people,
Yeah.
right? Right now, the issue
Hmm.
is the people who say, oh, merges are useless, we don't want to follow merges, yada, yada. You ask them, what's your source then? How are you
Yeah.
following these things?
Hmm.
And they'll, oh, they have no clue. So at
Right.
least be at the Hubari level where their arguments were educated.
Right. 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 And just so that we can conclude this, I think one thing that I wanted to also bring up, and this is how I've been analyzing this, the rationale and the reason behind um why pluralistic thoughts in our society is not really engaged with, right? The reason is, I think, what I understand, I think I'm a huge fan of behavioral sciences, and one thing that I really enjoy understanding is that how people and why people react or behave in a certain way. And what I understand, I think lack of knowledge is paramount, and I 100% agree with Wali that the issue of gaps in knowledge is the reason why we reject someone or not entertain them and all of that. But I think the other thing is that we equip our people sometimes with a lot of knowledge way too fast and a more emotional, in an emotional way. So what happens is that when you read out the, you know, what happened to Bibi Fatima and the whole burning of the door incident and all of that, that riles people up, right? So when that riles people up, and rightfully so, and they have good intention to be riled up and be angry about it. But what happens is that out of their naivete or their lack of knowledge, what they do is that anyone who comes to you and says that, hey, let's question the chain here, let's see how accurate this is, and try to understand, not rejecting it, just saying that let's understand, Maulana, where did you read this from, or what's the name of the book, may I read? That question in itself is basically, a turn off for so many people. They're like, oh, so you're not a, you reject whatever happened, so you love the first three caliphs, or you're, all of that stuff, right? So in their emotion, because we've empowered them with the knowledge which is quite powerful and emotional by its nature, in their understanding of it, they stop thinking outside the box, which is why you come to a point where people, suggest that, that they don't entertain different ideas because they are looking at knowledge and information which is right from an emotional perspective. And just put that formula in any of the discussions that you see online, right, amongst our people, predominantly around, doing zanjeer or not zanjeer. Whenever you start and have a discussion with them about zanjeer, pro or anti, whatever, they always react in a much more emotional manner because they have been imparted the knowledge about that, be it pro or anti, in an emotional way. So there's no
Mhm.
emotion when it comes to right or wrong, right? So you have to really divorce yourself from the emotions of it, as hard as it may be, and really try and understand the context and the academic aspect of it. And then, like you said, I think in the start, which is very important, if there's no disagreement with the first three things that we say, the what we refer to as a sul, if there's no disagreements there, anything else outside of it, we can have a discussion about. We can debate. We can say, hey, I agree with that, I disagree with that, without calling one another muqassir or ghali, or you're agent of that, or you're pro that, and you're Umar's, uh, sons, or what. I mean, people go to such lengths to just
Mhm.
throw shades at one another to try and disprove that you're from that party. It's insane, and you know, I want to really have the conversation with those people who really go all out and attack these people and say, uh, what do you expect? Do you expect everyone to just think like you? Do you expect that, whatever interpretation you have of this anything, you want everyone to have that understanding? That's impossible. You can't have that. And that's the same thought that we bring up to our Sunni brothers. We say, hey, we're just questioning the Sahabas who weren't loyal, or like they weren't the same after the Prophet passed away. That doesn't make us like non-believers. Everyone has a right to be judged fairly. So when we bring that argument forward, our main thing is that, hey, let's be honest and let's try to expand our minds and have a discussion academically. But when it comes to our own people, we forget, that's our argument. There's no academics, there's all emotional. There's everything is emotional, everything is like I'm right and you're wrong, and you're Hamnai and all of that. It's insane. So I think it's very important that our people, whenever we're arguing with anyone or whenever we're having discussion, be it peaceful or non-peaceful, try and see if you're coming from a perspective of emotion. Because if you're coming from a perspective of emotion, more than likely you will probably not end up convincing or even getting your point across to the slightest. And that's a fact, right? You have a discussion about Bibi Fatima and Ahl Bayt with a non-Muslim, you're gonna go all out with your emotion. They're great people, I love them, and they did this Karbala and all. They're gonna be like, what? Because they're not attached to that ideology that you're presenting in an emotional way. But if you go to them academically, That's what attracts them, and they're like, okay, let me understand this. Oh, a person who was the grandson of the prophet, happened to be the grandson. That's not the main thing, but was denied the right to live freely in a you know under a despotic regime. Okay, now that attracts me as a non-Muslim. Like, okay, I want to know more about this guy, right? Not like, oh, Imam Hussain, Pani Band, and all of that. That's emotional. That only people like us, understand. But I think as long as quickly as you can, divorce yourself from emotions when it comes to these discussion, and when you find yourself finding your arguments in emotion, that should be your trigger and saying that, okay, maybe I'm not handling this the way I should. So that was my. I know it went a little long, but I mean that's how I dissect this.
So if
Parting
I,
thoughts,
I think that's
from
Khalid.
my point, yeah,
go ahead, sir.
go ahead. No, I just wanted to
No,
say
no, go ahead.
it's, I think if I'm, okay, what I'm reading from what you're saying is basically gauge your audience, right? Like, if you're talking to someone who it will work, the ethos, right? You go
Yeah,
emotional with them. But if you're talking to someone who's not going to have any emotional investment into this conversation, you need to figure out how should I talk to them, and maybe academics or like things that they are, very strong on. Like, for instance, I
right.
was just thinking about this. If you take the story of Karbala, right? Imam Hussein purchased the land of Karbala.
Hmm.
So you could make this, if you wanted to convince your libertarian friends about Imam Hussein, you could argue that, hey, this is a property rights issue.
Yeah,
Imam Hussein was defending his property, and these usurping government was coming in
yeah.
and trying to
These
take his
thugs were
rights.
coming in. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And
and
just
that's
to
yeah.
quickly go back to that point which you mentioned, that if someone is emotional, I would actually go reverse of that. If I'm addressing someone who's ultra emotional, I would try and
Mhm,
bring the emotion out of it and say, hey, you know what, let's just put the emotion aside. Because whatever belief that they have, if that's based on emotion, they're never going to understand and believe me, or even
mhm,
pay heed to a single word I say. But as long as they they,
mhm,
they remove themselves from emotion, I remove myself from emotion, and talk based on academics, facts, understanding of the position that or any discussion that we're having, that's going to yield some a better result. We don't have to agree at the end of it. Not like there's no,
mhm,
this is not competition that at the end of our discussion one must believe in Zanjir Zani, and the other has to not believe in. No, we can go away from and say, okay, I understand where you're coming from. Now you understand where I'm coming from, and that's fine. We can all disagree, but my point is that coexist as a society, as a community. God knows we've gone through so much, and the last thing we need is
mhm,
infighting. Last thing we need is people just throwing each other off the bus and saying, "No, you're not Shia." What? This is not an exclusion band. Imam
So,
Hussein was not an exclusion. He's an inclusive person.
so
Not
I'll
like
just
you're
take
not
that.
one of us. You're not one of them. Yes, Ali,
Yeah,
bhai,
so I'll
finish up.
just take that point, right? I mean, I think we're not over time. We could put this in a 2 episode thing now. We can
Yeah,
make it 45 minutes each or an hour each, whatever. But
yeah.
what I would say is I just wanted to pick that point, right? Zanjeer Zani. Very interesting point, and I'll come to the emotional side of it, right? But just because you mentioned that, I want to talk about it. Go to the site that says don't do it and ask them why, right? They're like, oh, because Khamenei Saab said no. Oh,
Yeah.
okay, fine. You're listening to a merger, amazing. You understand him. You don't do it, fine. Where does Khamenei Saab say, go and stop the others who are doing it?
mhm,
He doesn't say that, right? He just says, you don't do it if you follow me. That's all he says, right? And then if you actually go back to the original fatwa of Ayatollah Khomeini, who says why you shouldn't do it, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Because it was sending a very bad message when Iranian revolution was coming out. Everybody was already hating on it, and then when they see, oh look, Iran, look what they do. This is what they're doing to kids. This is what they're doing to themselves. They're savages. Was it used? I think the first time I told you that there's somebody in San Francisco in a Jalous who came up to me and said, "This one hand matam that we're doing out in the Jalous, this is savagery." And this is by a Shia person, a very progressive Shia person of the community, who came and told me that. Right?
Wow.
Point being, if that person can say that, then Ayatollah Khomeini back in the 70s was perfectly right. What is the international community looking at this
mhm.
and saying? Right? So
Exactly.
Yeah.
you have to go back and read the context.
You're
So if anybody's
giving
saying
fuel
I'm
to the
following a
fire.
merger saying this, perfectly fine. No issues at all. Now, if you go and ask
Mhm,
somebody who doesn't follow any merger or follows Ayatollah Sistani and then says this is wrong, go ask them, what's the problem, brother? right? What's the issue?
Mhm.
And they will tell you, oh, the way they do it is wrong, and a lot of this is show off, and a lot of these guys don't even pray, they don't do any of that, yada yada yada. They'll go into all of that mirage, right? And if you give a cardinal argument
Mhm.
saying, what if I do it in a container where nobody's looking at me? I do it right after the Asr Majlis for Imam Hussain, and get done with it. I wear black cloth so nothing is shown, and I do it, and I'm done. Oh, I think that's fine. That's the result. And I've done that. I've actually
Mhm.
experimented this. And
Yeah.
they're perfectly okay with that, right?
So it
Now,
means it's not
ask
the
me,
principle that they're against. It's just the way
there's
it's
no principle.
executed.
Is it
Yeah.
haram or halal? No. Is it
No.
haram in a certain sense? Okay. Now, anybody before they question me, till they do zanjeer. I have zanjeer in my house. I have zanjeer sitting right here in front of me right now, brand new ones that I distribute to people, right?
Right.
I've
Mhm.
done all the huni matams out there. I'm not against zanjeer, right? And a lot of the people who can point out at me can, anyways, I don't want to go into that. But point being, am I against a lot of the ways people do zanjeer? 100%. 100%. The ones where you're using talwars that are these long, yeah, there's a limit. If your back is a certain size, you can use a certain size of zanjeer, right? The same way, if you're going out to
Mhm.
battle, you say, oh, if Imam Hussain, I was there, I was good. Imam Hussain is going to give you a 50-pound sword and say, go battle now. You won't be
Yeah.
able to lift it. What are you going to do for Imam Hussain?
Yeah.
What exactly? Let me ask you another question. You have any battle experience? What are you going to do there? All the Bani Hashims were trained since they were kids. What
Mhm.
exactly are you going to do in Karbala? I'm just going to, without any experience, I'm just going to go and stand there and just get shot at. You're actually going to
Mhm.
become a liability more than a person
Yeah.
who is
Yeah.
useful, right?
Absolutely.
So everybody who says, "Oh, we're going to use the biggest G and this and that," come on, man, please, because now you're creating a liability for the people for the center and for the people around you and for the doctors whose time you have to waste, who has to go and patch you up, and the hospital bed that you're going to utilize, right? So I'm against that. Yes.
I actually want to point.
Stay in your
I
lane.
want to actually point out on that. Let me. And actually, this is a thing at Sabah that happened in the early '90s. That Swerpa, my older brother, told me about this. Somebody wanted like when Sabah was on White Road, they wanted to do Zanjir, and there were doctors who literally risked their licenses because some idiot who Josh Malki, they did it, and they cut, I think, very close to their jugular vein. And
Oh
these
boy.
doctors had to stitch them up. And the thing is, you can't take them to the hospital. You take them down to Stanford, they're gonna be like, "What
What
happened?
happened?
Why is this person cut up?" And then
No, so
these
hold
doctors,
on. I
again, to
just
your
want to
point,
clarify. Sorry, I want to clarify. Self-flagellation is
Mhm,
allowed in the United States law. There's no such
mhm.
thing as cops going to come and actually take you in or arrest you because you self-flagellated. So that's allowed. As far as this thing goes, if
No,
he
it was
had marks
more
in
on
the back,
the doctor.
okay,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So that could be
We're
questionable,
talking
but
about the doctor's
self-flagellation
point
in
of
the
view.
United States is allowed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
From a doctor's point of
So
view, he was referring to. Yeah.
so
yeah,
that's exactly what I'm saying.
yeah.
So there are two things I'm talking about in this. Not just the doctors, is the person doesn't even know what he's doing. And the person who's giving that zanjeer,
Exactly.
why did you give such big? Give a small or stop that person, right? Secondly, second point, and this is to
Hmm.
my own brothers in zanjeeri faith, right? Uh, why do you have to wait? Like, what are you waiting for to do zanjeer? Why does the Zuljana have to come? Why does the tabut have to come for
Yeah.
you to be in that state?
Yeah.
That's an open question.
Hmm.
Why?
Hmm.
Because that's when you see the tabut coming in saying, "Oh, I gotta be in front of the Zuljana. If the Zuljana does not see me, it's going to be a big deal." And by the way, majority of these Zuljanas that people
And
bring are actually rented out horses that they bring and they put stuff on. So,
exactly.
apologies, somebody's getting
Yeah,
hurt with that
that's I've
sentiment,
heard.
but that's the
And
reality.
yeah,
But
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And
point being,
actually,
go
Al
ahead, go ahead.
Murtaza had sorry, had a similar issue where they had a horse like
I
this,
have
and they
no
told him,
problem with
"Don't do
that.
it in
Look,
front of."
there's no problem. There's no problem. You can do that. There's
No,
absolutely
no,
no issue for
yeah, no.
getting a rented
So
horse
no,
to do
that was
this.
the thing. No, so yeah, yeah. So no, the owner of the horse, they were Shia. They had been breeding these Zuljanas, right? But they were like, "Look, the Zuljana is trained mostly for Jalus. Don't do Zanjir in front of it." They asked the owners because
Yeah.
this horse is gonna get spooked,
Yeah.
and that horse got spooked, and they ended up the horse got loose, and it ended up uh, going on like 7 or 8 cars, and then you had broken windshields and damages, and then guess who
All
had
right, so
to foot the
let's
bill?
not go into details of centers, but all I'm saying is, look, the point being, yes, you can do that. And a lot of these horses that you're talking about in Karbala, everywhere else, they were war horses, so they were trained for these kind of situations.
Mm-hmm,
Point being,
mm-hmm,
why do you have to wait for the Zuljana to come out and do it? Why can't you just
Yeah.
go in the and of course, the camera has to be there,
Camera has
right?
to be there.
Pictures have to be taken,
Must be
videos
wearing
have to be
white.
taken and put online, right? You have to wear white, so the blood has to show that you have actually done matam, right?
Yeah.
So who are you trying to please? Yourself, the audience around
Mhm.
you, the people who want to watch online and say mashallah and mashallah and barmatmi barmatmi ye matmi, or you're actually doing it
Geo
for
Matmi.
akhri hujja, because Karbala is not happening again,
Mhm.
Yeah.
right? So why is the sentiment of, oh, if I was in Karbala, I would do it? Karbala is not happening again. But we do hear of a war, we do hear of a struggle. When the Akhri Hujjat when he comes, there's going to be there, right? So tell me this, when the Imam comes, he's going to be like, hey, ride this horse, use your zanjeer and go fight. When you have no clue how to operate an AK-47, or you have no idea what a Glock is, or you've
He'll be
never
like,
taken
Mhm.
a course in your entire life.
he'd be like, Imam, I can slap, that
I
on
can
my back.
self-flagellate
And I
myself.
mean,
Will that work?
Yeah,
Right?
if that helps. I mean, that's all
yeah,
I
and
can. That
I mean, furthermore to that point, it's like the guy's never been to a gym, has no stamina.
And
We're
that's
talking
exactly
about,
what I'm saying,
I'm talking
right?
about myself.
So I'm not going to go out there and question the aqidah and the faith of people on this. Fine, they have it, but again, be in places where it's not, at least do things in the proper manner. Women are watching, you want to do it. Why? Just let it be. If you can do it in an area where there are no cameras, there's nobody trying to watch you, and you're not waiting for people to bring the zojana out or the tabut out, the most amount of hurt or the most amount of grief that you have is right after the Messiah. Not after walking a
Mhm.
couple of paces, or not after walking or waiting on things, or you're waiting with this Zero, I'm going to do it now, hold on, and talking, hey, how are you doing? Just stay 5 feet away, okay. And now you're waiting for that to come. Where are you grieved? Where's the
yeah,
grievance,
what's happening? It's all
right?
orchestrated,
So,
as I don't
so am
understand.
I? So am I against the Zanjir? No. Am I against the way it's done? Yes. Am I? Do I do it? If you ask me, yes, I do. But do I do it in these conditions? No. I've actually asked people who ever taken a picture of me to take it down from their websites online, because that it makes no sense to me, right?
Right.
To advertise these things, right?
Indeed,
Is it a matter of
indeed.
any wajibat? No. Is it, again, coming back to now the people who are against it? There are only two reasons they're against it. One, oh, Khamenei perfect, acceptable. I understand that, and if I was following Khamenei, I would be against it too. But he never says go and stop the people who are doing it, or
Right.
question them, or tell them, oh my God, you guys are, whatever you're doing is wrong.
Right.
Second,
Right.
second, second is, oh, give blood, do this, do that. Sure, if you feel giving blood is the right thing to do, you go ahead and do that.
Do it.
No
Yeah.
problem. Let the other guys
That's
do
the
what
whole
they're
point.
doing.
That's the whole
Why is
point.
there a fight? What fight?
Entertain pluralistic mindsets. Entertain the fact that there might be people, even like I said, on our WhatsApp, conversations. No matter how absurd the thoughts are, the first thing that you could do to, like, the worst thing that you could do, an absurd, quote unquote absurd thought, is come
Mhm.
out fighting against it, because it's just going to empower it.
Mhm.
Exactly. See, emotion. What happens? This is, you said behavioral, right? You mentioned that.
Yeah.
So let's come to the sciences. Either you try to fact with facts. When you stop, you have no facts. You go and say, "I heard." When that is disproven, you try to avoid, and when you cannot avoid, you start arguing, and you get emotional,
Yeah.
and
So I mean, exactly.
that is seen in Trump followers. That is seen, and I'm talking about like the extreme ones, and then that is also seen in people like, your TTP and your Lashkar Jungvis and this like that. It's all argumentative. It's all emotional arguments, because at that
Modi.
point you get angry, and anybody who is even a little bit educated or tries to avoid conflict will back off, and you think you
Yeah.
won, right? And that's what it is. It's manipulation.
Mhm.
That's what there is to it. So, and again, this is coming from a guy who back in the early 2000s, and I call myself sometimes the OG of Shia Chat, because I've been there for so long,
Mhm.
that it's used to argue against the guys who were arguing for not doing Zanjir. And I'm like, this is why you do Zanjir, right? And it came after a long time that, what am I doing, right? You question yourself. So
Mhm.
point being, yes, and a lot of times most of these uh, young kids and youth are following a cult-like system, and they'll always have a leader that they follow. You need to
Right.
always remember that too, right? So
Mhm.
you don't have to go to them, but you have to figure out who their source is, more or less, because there'll always be one person they'll refer back to, right? It's not just them that they have read it or they have seen it. It's, oh, I heard, or I'm listening to whatever this guy is, or whatever this Babaji is, or whoever this person is. I'm going to listen to go and listen to them, right? So again, and all comes back to what that I said. Every single Shia kid, every single Shia kid. By the way, this was the norm before your whole, uh, you know, colonialism started back in the day,
Yeah.
right? So 300 years of colonialism did this to
Mm-hmm.
you, right? Back in the day, religious education for at least 3 months or 4 months up to a year was a necessity for every Shia household. Till date in Pakistan and India specifically, and I'm going through this why and lie, right? I start the houses system, and before that, I was reading books and doing all of that. Nobody cared. But as soon as I say to people, I'm in the house system, ta-da! Why you have nothing better to do? Or why why there are not enough Molanas, or why you're actually a very educated guy, or you're very intellectual, why are you in the health system? Like, what? Like, the questions that come to me are ridiculous. So I can only imagine a kid who is very intellectual, who's very smart, decides I want to go to the Hausa first, and I'm actually going to get my bachelor's and do that, or when I'm there I'll get my bachelor's in space sciences or chemistry or engineering or whatever. What that person
Right.
has to go through right now in Pakistan, what's the norm? You say, oh, Maulana, I want to make my son Maulana. Oh, why is he not doing anything? Is he not good enough to become an engineer or a lawyer? That's the norm. So when you have people of that thinking, then anybody from anywhere, and then religion is such a taboo subject that anybody who says Allahu Akbar becomes, the golden child,
Extremist.
and
Yeah.
basically has to be put at a throne that says, great, this is the person, he's a zakir who has never gone to regular school in his life, probably coming out of some village, and can only, repeat whatever a teacher told him, who was also a zakir, who had less knowledge. And now, just because he got a visa, he'll come to the Western countries and sit on a member and say stuff. We have to respect him no matter what. We cannot question him. You question them, the people who are sitting around him and next to him will start questioning you. That's the culture.
Yeah.
So how do you get rid of it? It's just educating the youth. Unfortunately, I'm sorry to say, but the adults are, at a point where they're not going to be rethought. We cannot teach them much. But it's the youth, it's the kids who are right now in Sunday schools. Change your systems. Bring pre-Hausa courses to the teens so they understand how to deduce their own knowledge from actual books, from actual Quran. I mean, I don't see. I mean, I see a future maybe in the next 50 years where we have marginal level kids coming out of U.S. systems
Yeah.
who understand this stuff,
Wouldn't be
and we don't have to
surprised.
depend on Iraq, right? So, but you have to first influence these Sunday schools, influence these schools to teach towards that, and move away from the education system
Mm-hmm.
that we have, where we try to go, oh yeah, we're going to take Islam and we're going to take the Western education and try to somehow mix it. But any Islamic education is not just Quran and what the Imams and what the duas are. That's not Islamic education. That's education that you get from home, or basic stuff, right? Islamic education is, what are these hadiths? What is ijtihad, right? These are the basic stuff that people should know,
Basic
right? When you know this,
tenets of your
you
religion,
can,
basically. The basics of your religion.
exactly. When you have that, then pluralism stuff sort of moves away and you become a society that's tolerable. Yes, they're
Yeah.
always going to have some sort of arguments because maybe I don't understand something. I don't understand Vilayat al-Faqih to a certain degree, even till date. I don't, right? But that doesn't mean I'm going to go out and hate on Al Khamenei. No, I think he's one of the best leaders in the world, in the sheer world we have had in a long time,
Yeah.
right? So just because I
Mm-hmm.
follow Ayatollah Sistani, why do I have to go and hate against Ayatollah Sistani? Right now in the Hausa system, I'm actually, learning the entire Tawzi al-Masail of Ayatollah Khamenei. Even though I follow Sistani Saab and I know his Tawzi almost, I wouldn't say that by heart, but I know a lot. But I want to know what Ayatollah Khamenei is saying on a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Where's the disconnect?
Mm-hmm.
Why is this an
That's right.
issue?
That's right.
Is my problem. That's a problem, right? So pluralism only exists within the Shia
Mm-hmm.
society because we have lack of education and we put scholars. Sorry, wrong word. Non-scholars, Zakirin, who have listened to somebody and now are just repeating stuff. And yet, if you ask them basic Sharia-related questions, they cannot answer you, right? On the members, and then put them at a throne that we cannot question them.
Yeah.
So in my wrap up, that's what I want to
Mm-hmm.
say, that increased knowledge, pre-Hausa courses should be a must for every teenager in the Shia household.
Yeah, I think that makes complete sense, and I 100% agree with you. I think it's going to be a while, but I think for the foreseeable future, unfortunately, we'll have to really cringe at what we see in the Shia Twitter space, unfortunately, and hopefully better sense prevail. Um, Sarosh, any final things you want to add?
Honestly, that that is so. Hello,
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead.
can you guys hear me?
Yeah, yeah. You there, Sarosh? We can hear you.
I think
Sir.
that's part of understanding that there will be a level of cringe. That means that we are growing, that we ourselves are able to grow to the point where we understand that these things are cringe. And to adding to Ali
Yeah,
Bhai's point, and Ali Bhai, correct me if I'm wrong, like we do need people who all of us have pre-Hausa level studying to be an Amama Wala Zakir or a
yeah,
Maulana. We need people, for instance, I don't ever plan to go to Hausa, but if and I know that I don't have the work ethic to get to that level of understanding, but I can sit with someone like Ali Bhai and other ulama and get the resources and read the books, right, that they recommend. That hey, Sarosh, go read this book. This will get you a better understanding of whatever you want to understand. But what that does is it allows me to learn my religion for myself rather than just listening to some guy sitting on a pulpit.
yeah.
And because like Ali Bhai said, a lot of these Zakireens, they don't have the first understand. Forget about history. They don't understand uh, Arabic rhetoric. They don't understand classical Arabic. I mean, I was talking to Nizam
They don't
Sahib.
understand Arabic. Period.
Exactly. I was talking to Sayyid Nizamuddin, by the way, he called as well uh, earlier. But, and I talked to him and I talked to Maulana Sayyid Samir Ali. I'm sure Ali Bhai knows him in Milwaukee. And both of them, their advice, I was like, I'm interested in learning more about Irfan and I want to read, the works of Ibn Arabi. He's like, and they both told me, you need to go learn classical Arabic. And that is the fundamental first step. We can't read our own material. Like, forget Arabic. We can't even read Urdu at times. Like how am I going to quote a book or quote the one of the things that that I love about Amar Naqshbani, say the Amar Naqshbani, that when he quotes an imam or he quotes a book, he tells you where you can find it in that book. You go to any Pakistani Urdu speaking Maulana, they're like Maula ne kaha. Okay, there were like 12 of these Maulas. Which Maula
Yeah,
are you talking? Who are you to, where was this said? And that's I think part of the issue, and that's what we need to work on. And you know Whereas, I'm sitting here with you guys as a quasi expert. I want to live in a time where I am seen as a layman
yeah,
and not as someone who is seen as someone who knows what I'm talking about. Because I don't know what I'm talking about.
yeah,
But unfortunately, I have to be that person because the people who supposedly should be knowing how to what to talk about, like Ali Bhai said, they're not at that level. I can't like me with an economics degree. I cannot talk to someone who only knows Arabic and Farsi and has read fiqh when I can't explain to them advanced economic concepts and ask them, hey, is if I go into, for instance, the investment into Bitcoin or into cryptocurrencies, is it halal or haram? Because they don't
yeah.
understand what I'm even talking about.
Going back to what you said, Mola said that, and Mola said, I mean, for all we know, it could be a friend, right? Because Mola
Yeah,
means friend, right?
exactly, exactly. If we are going with that definition of Maula,
Mola means friends, right?
he's probably talking about his
Just,
buddy.
Yeah. So talking about his buddy, what he said, right?
Yeah.
just to clarify, I mean, I'm not in any way. You put me in the names with ulama, so I'm not even. I'm a student, and I'm a very, very basic student. And as far as Arabic goes, I was talking to Molana Muzammil yesterday, and I told him, he's like, where are you stuck at? I'm like, my biggest Achilles heel is Arabic and not in Arabic, right? The grammar piece of things, and it's a mission because I'm at an age where it's very hard to learn another language. And when you do, I'm actually going towards the grammar. It's not just the speaking portion, right? That's the easy part. It's actually going in the grammar and then trying to understand what each of these books say, right? There are 56 variations of a word that if you go who, he, here, right, it completely changes in Arabic. It's not exactly the
Yeah.
same thing. And it can mean one person, two people, or more than three, a he, she, right? All of that, right? So in the past, in the present, in the future. So it's a very unique language where it's a very rich language, so it's a great point to learn Arabic, right? And especially learning it from a grammar perspective. Uh, But that does not mean that somebody holds themselves back saying, oh, because I can't learn Arabic, I can't learn more. That's why my library is all English, right? For a reason. And that's because anybody who says, oh, I have no idea what al-Kafi is, or, I don't know what the third volume of al-Kafi says. Here you go. There's a book, right? It's in English. You can read it, right? So they have no excuse of gaining knowledge. But it's a great point that it's hard for a lot of speakers to go back and reference a book because a lot of what they're doing is listening and they're repeating that. So
That's not exactly.
Anyway, so let's wrap it up. Appreciate your guys' time. It's been a while, so I think we got it all out, that whatever we were holding back for all this time. So appreciate it. Hopefully, anyone who's listening enjoys the discussion. We're probably gonna do a two-parter of this. I think anyway, probably have to break it up. But yeah, let us know what do you think. Thank you.
Yeah, and again, just to put it out there, these are our opinions, more or less. We are not in any way scholars. You're still learning, just like regular people. We have full-time jobs that we do, and
Which is why we're in between members and not on the
Yes,
member.
indeed.
exactly. We're in between the members, and and again, we do want critique from the people who are on the members to
Yeah,
definitely
of
critique us,
course.
tell us we're wrong,
Of
and
course.
maybe in our
Of
understanding,
course.
and we'd love to bring them on the show as well. So if you want to
Absolutely.
come on the show, inshallah, we can bring you forward. And thank you guys there for setting this all up, and inshallah, looking forward to doing another episode. Allah
Awesome.
Hafiz.
Okay. Allah Hafiz, guys. Thank you.
This.